In the autumn of 2021, I was navigating life on my own for the first time in a rented townhouse in southern Illinois. At 27, I had a steady job managing inventory at a distribution center, working late shifts that left me drained. I'd just gone through a painful breakup, and the quiet of the townhouse, nestled in a sleepy cul-de-sac off a rural highway, seemed like the perfect place to heal. The neighborhood was typical suburbia: beige vinyl siding, neatly trimmed hedges, wind chimes tinkling softly, and mailboxes with family names stenciled on them. My neighbors were mostly older folks and a few young families, but I kept to myself, preferring the solitude. Early on, I noticed someone who stood out. A tall, heavy-set man, maybe mid-40s, with a scruffy beard, lived 3 doors down. He had an odd habit of standing outside at night, sometimes pacing, sometimes smoking, but often just staring into the dark. I'd pull into my driveway after work around 9 or 10 p.m., and there he'd be, leaning against his porch or standing at the edge of his driveway, eyes fixed on nothing. He never waved or acknowledged me, even when I looked right at him. It wasn't just his presence, it was his stillness, like he was a statue waiting for something. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just a night owl, but the unease grew. Then, in mid-September, things took a turn. One night, after a long shift, I crashed around midnight, only to be jolted awake at 2:37 a.m. by a sound, metal scraping against wood, like an old gate creaking. My bedroom was on the first floor, with a sliding glass door leading to a small, fenced-in backyard lined with gravel. I heard it again, followed by soft, deliberate footsteps crunching across the stones. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and a dull kitchen knife from my nightstand, my only defense. Peering through the blinds, I saw nothing. The motion light hadn't triggered. I called 911, whispering to the dispatcher as I crouched in the dark. 2 officers arrived about 10 minutes later, their lights flashing through my front window. One checked the backyard while the other questioned me. They found no signs of tampering or footprints, and one officer suggested it was probably a raccoon, giving me a look that screamed, "You're overreacting." They left. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I inspected the backyard myself and found something odd: a flat stone about the size of a paperback, wedged under the gate to keep it from closing fully. The gate had a heavy spring that snapped it shut automatically, so this felt deliberate, like someone wanted easy access. I tossed the rock and called the police again, but they just added it to the report, saying there was no crime to investigate. Frustration gnawed at me. 2 nights later, at 2:14 a.m., I woke to the sound of my back door handle rattling. First gently, then with force. Frozen in bed, I felt someone standing just outside. The motion light flicked on, and through a gap in the blinds, I saw a shadow. A man, motionless, staring in. I called the police again, clutching my knife in the hallway. The same officers arrived, found large footprints in the gravel leading to the door, but again, no entry, no crime, no action. They promised more patrols and told me to lock my doors, like I hadn't been doing that already. The next day, I installed Wi-Fi security cameras above the front porch and back door. That night, I stayed up, watching the live feed. At 2:23 a.m., the back camera triggered. A tall man in a black hoodie, jeans, and gloves stepped in a frame, moving carefully to avoid the motion sensor until the last second. He walked to the door, looked straight at the camera, and grinned, a slow, unsettling smile, before vanishing into the dark. I called the police, showed them the footage, but they said without a break-in or visible weapon, their hands are tied. I begged them to check the neighbor's doorbell cam, but they refused. That night, I packed a bag and stayed at a hotel. When I returned, I found 4 muddy handprints on a glass door, too high, too low, like someone had crouched and stared inside. That was it. I broke my lease, forfeited my deposit, and moved out. The day I left, I found a note in my mailbox, written in cramped handwriting. The cops leave, but I don't. I filed one last report, and the officer seemed disturbed, but only promised a neighborhood wellness check. I never went back. A month later, a woman named Sarah messaged me on Facebook, saying she'd moved into my old unit. She asked if I'd ever seen a man in a black hoodie in the backyard, saying she'd heard footsteps and someone knocked on her glass door at 2 a.m. I didn't reply. I couldn't. In 2020, I worked for a property preservation company, handling foreclosed homes, securing them, cleaning them out, and winterizing them. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. Most houses were just empty shells, but some felt wrong. That year, I was sent to a rural property in upstate New York, a dying town with cracked roads and shuttered businesses. The house was a small, one-story place off a dirt road, surrounded by overgrown woods. It had been foreclosed after an elderly woman died, with no heirs claiming it. The utilities were long disconnected. I arrived on a Monday morning with my box truck. The house looked intact, but neglected, with weeds choking the porch. Inside, it was dusty, with faded furniture and lace curtains, like a time capsule. As I started taking photos, my work phone rang. No caller ID, just unknown. I had no signal out there, so it shouldn't have worked. I answered, hearing only static. I hung up, blaming a glitch. The living room was cluttered with old books and porcelain figures. The hallway smelled of mildew and something metallic. One bedroom was bare except for a sagging mattress. Another had a sewing machine and a corkboard pinned with dozens of obituary clippings. Local names, carefully cut out. In the master bedroom, I noticed a rotary phone on the nightstand, yellowed and ancient, its line long dead. Then my phone rang again, same unknown caller. I answered, stepping into the hallway. After a moment of static, a faint whisper said, "Don't answer the phone in the bedroom." The line went dead. I froze, checking windows and doors. All secure, no signs of anyone. My phone flickered between one bar and none. I tried calling my supervisor, but the call failed. Shaken, I kept working, boxing up items, but the feeling of being watched grew. Then I heard it, the rotary phone in the bedroom, ringing loudly, impossibly. It rang and rang, the receiver trembling. I didn't touch it. When it stopped, I decided to check the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, the air thick with mold and rust. In a corner, on a small table, sat a dusty cordless phone and a stack of notebooks. I opened one, pages of names, dates, and notes like LNR. June 2019, rang once, didn't answer. Dozens of entries, all similar. Panic hit. I bolted upstairs, drove to the office, and reported the house as unsafe, hinting at squatters. 2 days later, a co-worker, James, texted me. He'd gone to finish the job and heard the bedroom phone ring. He didn't answer, too freaked out, and quit the next day. I later found him on Facebook. He was fine, but never spoke of it again. The police checked the house and found nothing. It felt like a prank or a trap. In 2019, I lived alone in a cheap rental house on the edge of town. It was old, with creaky floors and a basement I rarely used. The basement door, in the hallway by the bathroom, was heavy, and its light switch was halfway down the stairs, forcing you to descend in darkness. It always fell off down there, but I stored some furniture and ignored it. In late October, things changed. I got home from my night shift as a security guard around 3 a.m. and heard 3 soft knocks from behind the basement door. I froze, waiting. They came again, deliberate, distinct. I didn't open it, retreating to my room and staying awake. The next morning, the basement was untouched, no signs of intrusion. I blamed the house settling. A few nights later, in the bathroom, a single, loud knock hit the basement door. I listened, ear to the wood, and heard faint breathing. I locked myself in my room and called my landlord. He checked the basement with me the next day, nothing amiss. A week passed quietly, but then, at 2 a.m., I heard the basement door creak open. I peeked down the hallway. It was wide open. I hadn't touched it in days. With a flashlight, I approached. The basement bulb was dead. Then I heard footsteps, slow, climbing the stairs. I slammed the door shut, feeling pressure from the other side, and called the police. They found nothing, no one. I installed a padlock on the door. A month later, I came home to find it broken, the door ajar. I didn't go down. I stayed with a friend, then nailed the door shut when I returned. Days later, at 3 a.m., a low, rumbling voice came from under my bedroom floorboards. I called the police again. Nothing. I packed up and left, abandoning my lease. I never learned what was in that basement, but sometimes, in my new apartment, I lie awake, wondering what might have come up those stairs.